Hey everyone, great to have you in church today. Sorry I'm not there, I'm on holidays. Kind of not that sorry. I'm kind of enjoying a holiday for a week, which is nice. But I wanted to share a story with you in the Easter story series. Now you might think Easter is done and dusted and we've moved on. But actually Jesus appeared to his disciples for about a number of occasions for over 40 days after his resurrection, before his ascension. So he was around, he was appearing in various places to various groups of people and individuals for up to 40 days. And one of those appearances was on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, or Lake of Galilee, up north in Galilee. And that's recorded in John chapter 21. We're going to look at that today. But first, a recap. On Palm Sunday, we saw that Jesus is the promised King, the one who was meant to come, God's deliverer. On Good Friday, we saw that Jesus is the crucified King, the one who took our sin and our shame and our guilt and took sin itself onto him and was crucified for us. On Easter Sunday, we celebrate Jesus as the risen, glorified King who we follow and serve. And today we're going to see, our main point for today, is that Jesus is the loving King, the loving and gracious King who restores and forgives and loves wholeheartedly, loves his people. Today's story begins with a fishing expedition. Now, I'm not much of a fisherman, but I've done it a few times. But this is a really good story in John chapter 21. Hadn't been very long since the Jesus' death and resurrection and the events we talked about last weekend. But some of the disciples had made their way back up north to Galilee, to where they were from. And no doubt on that walk back from Jerusalem, they were talking about all that had happened in the last 3 years, and particularly in the last couple of weeks with Jesus' horrible death, and then the joy of the resurrection and the appearances they'd already seen. Their heads would have been spinning as they walked back those couple of days' walk from Jerusalem up to Galilee. And they were probably wondering what was going to happen next. When would they see Jesus again? And they get back home, and perhaps sitting around thinking, what are we going to do? They decide to go fishing. Good idea. They were fishermen. That was their trade. Because they were on the Sea of Galilee, plenty of fish there. And they think they'll go fishing. But it's not a great idea. Let's read John 21, verse 1. After Jesus appeared again to the disciples by the Sea of Galilee, it happened this way. Simon, Peter, Thomas, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, that's James and John, and two others were together, so 7 of them. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, we'll go with you. Let's all go fishing. Great idea, guys. So they went out and got into the boat. But that night they caught nothing. I don't know if you've ever been fishing and caught nothing, even if you've stayed out all night, if you've ever done that, how frustrated you would be at catching nothing when you go fishing. But that's what happened to them. And then this happened. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples didn't realize it was him. They couldn't tell. And he called out to them, friends, have you any fish? Now, if you've ever been fishing and got nothing, and particularly if you've been fishing all night and got nothing, the last thing you want is an annoying guy on the beach yelling out, hey, you got any fish? Well, that's what Jesus did. They didn't know it was Jesus. No, they answered, in probably not a very nice tone. And he said, the man on the beach said, throw your net on the right side of your boat and you'll find plenty of fish out there. When they did this, they were unable to haul the net in because of a large number of fish. This was a miraculous catch. He tells them to throw their nets in on one side of the boat, and they get this huge haul after getting nothing all night. And the lights go on. Not the actual lights, because they weren't any, but in their head, the lights go on. And they realize the man on the shore isn't just some ordinary stranger annoying them. It's actually Jesus again. Jesus is there. Then the disciple who Jesus loved, that's John, said to Peter, it's the Lord. It's the Lord. You imagine how Peter felt. And as soon as Simon Peter heard him say that, he wrapped his outer garment around him and jumped into the water away out. And the other disciples followed in the boat, but Peter swam and ran and splashed his way into shore. He couldn't wait. And they were about 100 yards out, it says. And when they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals. Jesus had a fire going. I was going to have a fire, but, permits and all that sort of stuff. I didn't do it. They saw a fire of burning coals with a fish on it and some bread. And Jesus said, come, bring some of the fish you've caught. So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat when it got in and dragged the net ashore with the others. And they counted 153 large fish. Now, I'm not sure if 153 divided by 7 works out whether they all got the same amount, but there was a big catch. Even so, the nets were torn because of it. And Jesus said to them, he invited them, come and have breakfast with me. But none of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. And this was still a bit freaky, all this stuff. Jesus came, took the bread and gave it to them and did the same with the fish. This was the third time Jesus had appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. Their heads are still spinning in joy and wonder. And it sounds wonderful, doesn't it? This appearance on the beach. But there's a problem, and no one says much. It's kind of a quiet breakfast. And the reason for that is because there was an elephant in the room. Well, not really on the room, in the beach. You know, and not a real elephant. One of those things that no one wanted to talk about, but kind of needed talking about. Because you see, everyone knew that on the night of Jesus' arrest, Peter had let Jesus down spectacularly. Peter had opened his big mouth and said, Jesus, even if everyone else deserts you, I won't. I'll stick with you. I'm your most loyal follower. And then when the crunch came and Peter was put under a bit of pressure by a few ladies around a fire in the courtyard at Jesus' trial, he completely went to water. And he said, never heard of Jesus. Cursed and swore and said, don't know the man, got nothing to do with him, and took off. He deserted Jesus. He denied him 3 times. And then a rooster crowed, and Peter remembered what Jesus had said, and he wept bitterly how failed he had been, how unloyal he had been, and he was gutted and broken by that. And this had not been dealt with, as far as we know, it had not been dealt with since that night till now. Jesus had appeared, but this had not been dealt with. And Jesus knew that there was an elephant, and Jesus didn't like to keep elephants on the beach or in the room or anywhere. Jesus liked to deal with elephants, and still does unfortunately like to deal with the elephants in the room and in our lives. And he graciously did this in a loving way with Peter. Verse 15, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these guys? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said, feed my lambs and my people. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time, he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt because Jesus kept asking him 3 times, do you love me? He said, well, you know all things, Lord. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. You see, it was around another charcoal fire just a few weeks earlier in the courtyard that Peter had denied Jesus 3 times. Now around this charcoal fire on the beach, Peter's given a chance to reaffirm his commitment to Jesus, his love of Jesus 3 times. Just as Peter had denied him 3 times, so 3 times he gets to express his love of Jesus. It's like Jesus is cancelling out all those mistakes, each one at a time, till they're all gone, graciously forgiving him, undoing them, one painful reaffirmation at a time. Jesus is showing Peter forgiveness. He's showing him grace and love, expressing his love towards him and restoring their relationship together after Peter's spectacular failure. Don't think there was an aeroplane flying around, a helicopter actually, on the day, but there is today, just to prove I'm not up at the Sea of Galilee. Jesus is commissioning Peter for a life of serving him and leading his people, his sheep, in the kingdom. You know, if you think back, if you know the story, and we had a Bible reading today from Luke chapter 5, that's when Jesus first called Peter to be his disciple. There was an amazing catch on the same lake, and Jesus said, come follow me, Peter, and I'll make you fishers of men. And so there's such a great parallel there, that this amazing catch on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus recommissions Peter and gives him a second chance. You know, I love that about Jesus, that he gives people second chances. In the scriptures, we see that so often. And in our lives, it's true. He gives us second chances. In some ways, that's what the gospel message is. The good news is that despite our mistakes and the things we've messed up, we can have a second chance because of Jesus' love towards us, because Jesus is the loving King. So Jesus is reminding Peter of his first calling and his commitment he made, and refreshing that calling. We follow the loving King who's good and loving and kind. 5 quick things about this story that I love. First one, kind of already mentioned, that forgiveness and restoration are available in Jesus. They're still available today. Jesus knows and understands all of our failures and our mess ups and our brokenness and our sin, and his heart is for forgiveness of us, and restoration and love and grace towards us. For all people, all the people lost and wayward and who feel far from God in life, and even for us, his followers who mess up. Jesus never writes people off. Jesus never writes people off. I love that. In the Gospels, we see this with the adulterers and the lepers, the outcasts, and the sinful woman, and Zacchaeus, who was ripping people off, and the prodigal son who wandered far away and wasted everything. Jesus' heart is for resurrection in people's lives. He's a gracious and loving king, and that is really good news. Now, I don't know about you, but I have. Have you ever failed Jesus? Felt like you let him down somehow? Done something you shouldn't have done? Wish you hadn't? Maybe in the past, maybe recently, maybe now. And you feel guilty by it and broken by it. You just wish you could undo it. Jesus doesn't want us to live and stay in our guilt and regret. His heart is to lovingly forgive us. He's a loving king, and restore us and lift us up from our failure. Lift us up out of the mud and the mire and put a new song in our heart and a fresh start in our lives. He wants us to move from brokenness to wholeness, from failure to restoration, from death to life. That's the Christian message. It's not about becoming perfect, but becoming mature and being renewed and transformed and wholeness. Jesus came that we might have life and experience life within us. The resurrected King can resurrect us. I love that. It's never too late for this. It happened to Peter, and it can happen to us. Well, as I said, not only did Jesus forgive Peter that morning, he commissioned him. He re-sent him out to be a key leader of the early Jesus movement. Jesus had a specific task for Peter to fulfill, to lead and care and spiritually feed this new movement, these followers of Jesus, the sheep. And Jesus launched Peter into kingdom service that morning on the beach. Jesus saw who Peter was, and he knew all Peter's mistakes, but Jesus believed in Peter, who he could be and who he could become. And it happened. If you read the Acts in the Bible, if you read Acts, you see that Peter was the leader of the church, the first preacher of the church. This bold preacher, the fisherman, became a shepherd. Jesus believes in his followers. I love that thought, and that's my second thought today from this story. We believe in Jesus, but I just want to let you know this morning that Jesus believes in us. Jesus believes in us, sees who we can become if we surrender to him, and wants us to become that person. We believe in him, but he believes in us. He's got roles to us to fulfill, kingdom work for us to do, character to grow in. He's for us. We can minister and serve in his name, and on his behalf we can become the people he wants us to become. He believes in us. Even if other people don't believe in you, Jesus believes in you and who you can become and what he can do through you. Jesus forgives and restores. Jesus believes in us. And third point, love is central. Love is central to Jesus' message, to the kingdom, to our lives. Love is the primary prerequisite for Christian service and life and leadership. Key question, Simon, do you love me? Do you love me more than these? He didn't mean, is your love better than them? But are you still full on, Peter? Am I your first priority? Am I your first love? It's a simple question, but it's challenging. David, do you love me? Or put your name in there. Imagine Jesus asking that question, do you love me? Really, do you love me? Love of Jesus and love of people goes hand in hand with that. If we love Jesus, we love people. Christian service and ministry is a people ministry. It's not running a program or running a show or whatever, or keeping a building nice and tidy. It's a people ministry. It's pastoral, feeding, shepherding, teaching, sacrificing, serving type of work. And Jesus modeled it, and we can all do it. It's not just for the preachers or the pastors or the elders. We can all do that. We're all commissioned to love others with the love that Jesus has given us and put in our hearts. And encouraging, caring, looking out for other people, praying for people, ministry. Yeah, Peter got this. If you read 1 Peter chapter 5, and we looked at 1 Peter a few months ago, and you look at what Peter spoke about, he said, I encourage you to follow the great shepherd Jesus, the chief shepherd, as we are shepherds, and we care for those under our flock. We care for our flock. See, Peter's heart became one that loved people as Jesus worked in him and Jesus changed him. See, in church life, the kingdom is built on loving one another and spreading Jesus' message of love. It's not just about what gets done. It's also about how we get it done. We do it lovingly. Then Jesus gives Peter a further insight into his future in verse 18 of chapter 21. And it's not a great picture. He says, very truly, I tell you, Peter, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and you went where you wanted, you did what you liked. But when you're older, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. You're going to be a prisoner, Peter. You're going to be a captive. Jesus said this, as John wrote this later, to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, follow me. So history records that Peter was taken prisoner under Nero and taken to Rome and actually crucified upside down. The history records that he didn't feel worthy to be crucified the same manner of Jesus, so he requested to be crucified upside down. He gave his life for his following of Jesus, for his faith. He's already told Peter that he's going to have this future of leading God's people. Now he tells him that what he's been called to will cost him his life. That's a big call. Peter, this is going to cost you your freedom and your life, but follow me anyway. Yeah, fourth thing I wanted to say is that Jesus calls us to follow him no matter what. That is so easy to say and so hard to live in those no matter what type situations. Peter had promised an undenying devotion to Jesus once before, but he failed. But this time he didn't fail. As I said, history records that Peter did not fail. He did not deny Jesus again. You can go to St. Peter's Basilica in Rome and see Peter's tomb. Very, very historically likely that is the actual tomb or execution spot of Peter. It cost him his life, but in costing him his life, Peter found life. He came to life. He got to live this incredible life, and now he has eternal life. He is alive now in heaven with Jesus forever as we can be. Jesus calls us to follow him no matter what. It's good to remember that now, because when the time comes when life is difficult and we have to face difficult situations, that's what we need to remember. Peter's example and Jesus' call on our lives to follow him no matter what. Final thought, verse 20 says this: Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved, that was John, was following them in this conversation. When Peter saw him, said, Lord, what about him? If I'm going to be prisoner and it's going to cost me my life, what's going to happen to him? And Jesus said, that's none of your business, Peter. Well, I'm talking to you. If I want him to remain alive for a long time, what is that to you? You must follow me. You see, there's something about our walk with Jesus. We're part of a church, we're part of a community, we're part of a historic movement of people who have followed Jesus for 2,000 years. There's a corporate element, but there's also an individual element where I would just say it's on us, it's on me. My walk with Jesus is on me, it's my responsibility. My life, my following is ultimately on me. We're in it together, we love and support each other, but there's a sense in which how I walk with Jesus and what happens to me is on me. How God is dealing with me and what happens in my life is on me. And I'm not accountable for how someone else responds to Jesus. I encourage and I help, but it's on them. Ultimately, we all stand before God ourselves. Peter wanted to know what was going to happen to John. And Jesus said, no, Peter, I'm talking to you. You worry about your life. Okay? You worry about following me and fulfilling the calling I put on your life. And I'll talk with John about his life. Now, we follow the loving King. I love this story, this post-Easter story on the Sea of Galilee. I love how it shows Jesus' restoring and loving and gracious heart and how he gives second chances. I love that. You know, at the end of this Easter period, let's come to Jesus. He loves us. He's the gracious and restoring and forgiving King. Let's reaffirm our allegiance to him. You know, we've considered Palm Sunday and Easter, Good Friday and resurrection joy, and here we are on the beach considering Jesus' restoring heart and how Peter reaffirmed his love 3 times. You know, it just doesn't hurt us to just continually reaffirm our love and allegiance to Jesus and our desire to follow him no matter what. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for this story that you recorded it. You could have just finished with the Resurrection Sunday and that was enough, but you put this story in, I think, because you just wanted to show us how loving you are, how you give second chances, how Peter was commissioned again. And I think you want to do that because you want us to understand that you understand our mistakes and you forgive us. And Lord, I just pray for anyone who's feeling a sense of they need a second chance in life, that they've messed up and there's something they wish they just hadn't done but they had. Lord, I pray that by your Spirit you would show them that you're the loving and gracious King and you forgive. And if there's something in your heart, in your life that you just has been bugging you and you just feel like you need Jesus' forgiveness, you just tell him what it is and say, Lord, forgive me. Forgive me for my sin. And I guarantee you that Jesus will forgive you. You just need to believe that. This story is here to help us understand that. We are forgiven. He is the gracious King. And not only does he just forgive us, he doesn't leave us there. He commissions us. He sends us out to feed his sheep, to fish for mankind, if you like. And Lord, I just pray that you would raise us up as shepherds and fishermen and women of people. Help us to love people, I pray. Help us to leave this Easter season with a sense of love in our hearts and gratitude that changes our life like Peter's life was changed, and that we follow you, Lord, no matter what. And as we finish, Lord, we just reaffirm our allegiance to you. You are our King. You're the risen King, the crucified King, the promised King, the loving King, and we reaffirm our allegiance to you together now, in your name. Amen. All right, well, bless you. See you again soon. Look forward to being back with you all. Thanks.